Today's episode of Socially Democratic is presented to you by Dunn Street. Dunn Street partners with businesses, organisations, unions and social democratic parties across the globe to develop community organising strategies and train leaders to build power from the ground up. And in 2021, Dunn Street will continue to work with folks that want to share their stories, inspire others, take action, give hope and organise communities for change. To find out how you can partner with Dunn Street, hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. And before we get into today's podcast, if you have had to take time off work because of injury or illness, then you need a strong player on your team. Maurice Blackburn is Australia's #1 super claims law firm. They can check if you have insurance as part of your super and help you make a super TPD claim. Maurice Blackburn fights for fair. Call them on 1-800 111 222. That's 1-800 111 222, or go to their website, which is mauriceblackburn.com.au. That is mauriceblackburn.com.au. Be part of change and fight for fair. Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic, your weekly centre-left politics and organising podcast that dives into the progressive campaign issues of the day and the people leading them from home and abroad. But we're going to do something different today. Is our special pop culture episode. It's the middle of the year, winter solstice. The days are getting shorter. It's getting colder, certainly for us down here in the southern part of the country. And a bunch of public holidays are coming up. So that means you've got long weekends. That means you've got a lot of time on your hands. And that means you can watch TV. And so we thought we'd help you out with some shows that you should watch. And we're going to review one today with our pop culture correspondent. Tess Farrell is joining us once again to break down a film this time. The last time we had Tess on, we've done a couple of TV shows, but today we're going to do a film. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Stitcher. And if you're using Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and give us a review. And for all the updates on the show, follow Dunn Street on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn. Okay, let's get to today's episode. Okay, we are taping this one on a Thursday afternoon in lockdown Melbourne. And I say that we're in lockdown Melbourne because I feel somewhat level of responsibility, or maybe I've jinxed it, because a couple of weeks ago, our listeners will remember I started the show and I said we're taping this one on a whatever day in lockdown Melbourne, and we weren't in lockdown. And I think I've jinxed it because we are now in lockdown. And at that time, I didn't feel like we were anywhere near going into some kind of lockdown. But here we are. We actually are in lockdown. And as I said, I feel some level of responsibility. Not as much responsibility as Scott Morrison should be probably taking for the fact that he can't roll out a vaccine. But I feel a little bit of responsibility. So I do apologise to the rest of Victoria for jinxing what was going quite well. So no better time then. Now, to do what we're going to do today. The theory behind today's episode was, it's halfway through the year. It's been a while since we've done a show on pop culture. WA's heading into a long weekend this weekend. The rest of the country is going to head into a long weekend the weekend after that. We're all going to be, it's winter. We're all going to be sitting on the couch under the doona, eating, fat food and red wine and chocolate. Why not find out from the good folks of Socially Democratic what you should be watching on TV these long weekends? But now it's even more pertinent because for people in Victoria, we're all stuck inside anyway, so you should be watching TV just constantly. And to help me break down what we're going to preview today is our pop culture correspondent, Tess Farrell. Welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Hello, Stephen. Thank you for having me. Thank you for bringing us back into lockdown. It is all your fault. I'll happily put the blame on you. I can't believe we are here again, but that's life. And it's funny that you mentioned that it was going to be winter and we'd all be on the couch drinking red wine and eating chocolate on a long weekend, because that's pretty much what everyone's doing in lockdown anyway.
What have you taken from your Melbourne winter lockdown 2.0, the big one last year? What's been your key learnings or lessons that you're taking into this one so you're far more prepared and are not making rookie mistakes?
My key learnings: get out and walk. Get out and walk as many times as the government will allow you to walk. Go outside, even if it's raining, even if it's cold. going outside is the only thing that really helps. And try and stay off your phone. Don't doom scroll, because you doom scroll, you scroll, and then you can't sleep, and then you don't get any sleep, and then your whole day is just crappy. So get outside, get some fresh air, and don't scroll. What have you learned?
I've learnt, I don't know if I've got any key learnings, but there are some familiarities to this experience that we had last year. And one of them involves my morning routine of going and getting coffee. And this is going to sound very Melbourne here, but I've got a coffee shop that is opposite the Dunn Street studios that I frequent every morning. And the folks that work there are incredibly lovely people. They make great coffee. I think I'm a local to the point that I sort of kind of treat the coffee shop like it's my second lounge room, because I kind of make myself probably a little bit too comfortable when I decide to sit in and do some work from the shop. But that's my second home, and I love going there. But during lockdown last year, they closed, which is completely understandable. And that happened with a lot of coffee shops across the central business district of the city. In fact, there was only probably a handful of coffee shops that remained open during that time. And it meant that I had to search out a second coffee shop, which I found and made good coffee. And so I went there for the entire lockdown. And same deal, lovely people, really lovely people, and built up a rapport with them, and that was all wonderful. And then when lockdown ended, I was like, oh, what do I do? Do I stick with the people that were there for me during lockdown, or do I go back to my original one? And I was torn, and I started to like kind of play both sides of the street. I would go there on alternate days, and eventually I just settled into my old coffee routine, the original coffee shop across the road. Then we went back into lockdown and they closed again. And I've gone scampering back to like an old girlfriend to the lockdown coffee shop. And even though I've got a mask on, they recognise me. They said, oh, hi, Stephen. Haven't seen you for a while. And I just felt so sheepish. I said, yeah, I know. You're my lockdown coffee shop. And they went, and they left it at that. I was like, oh, God, I feel bad. I feel real bad.
Coffee loyalty is a real thing.
I know.
It's a real thing. And I always really had a grudge against Melbourne baristas because they never remember your name in the hipster part of Melbourne that I live in. And yeah, I mean, eventually, after months and months in lockdown, the baristas at my local learned my name. And that was just like, yes, I've done it. I've made it. I'm a true Melbourneian. And then when we came out of lockdown, they forgot my name again. So now I'm supporting small businesses by, I will go to a different coffee shop every day of the, lockdown, different place. Right. And share the love, which maybe we should all do if you can.
That's a good point. That is a good point.
Yeah.
Well, shall we get into today's episode? We're going to review the last two times you came on the show, which we did over summer. We did obviously the shows that shows or films we're going to review have a sort of a political or a social theme to it.
Yep.
We've done The Politician, which is a Netflix
yep.
series. We've done Mrs. America, which was on Hulu in the United States, and I think it was on, what was it in Australia?
Binge and Foxtel, I reckon.
Yep. So we did two TV series. Today we're going to do a film. Today we're going to review The Trial of the Chicago 7, which is a historical legal drama on the story of the Chicago 8, which then became the Chicago 7, a group of anti-Vietnam War protesters that were charged with conspiracy and crossing state lines with the intention of inciting riots at the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. It's directed by Aaron Sorkin, who we all know from The West Wing and Social Network and a whole bunch of other things. So let's jump on in. Now, starting with the first question I always ask you, did you know about this historical moment in history?
No, I don't know a lot about it. I mean, I think I did one semester in high school on the Vietnam War, and I think that was really mostly focused on, the impact on Vietnam, less so the American sort of anti-war movement. So I really didn't know much about this. I didn't know about the 7 who were on trial. Most of my sort of anti-Vietnam protest knowledge is based around Jane Fonda and what she might have been wearing at the time and how many times she got arrested. So that's a bit of a shameful thing to admit, but I have very little knowledge, so I learned a lot watching this movie.
I think I asked you this last time we spoke, and I can't remember what your answer was. Are you the kind of person that when you're watching a historical drama, that whilst you're watching it, you jump on Wikipedia and start researching as you're watching the show, or do you wait to the end of the show and then jump online and dive into that black hole that is Wikipedia to research exactly what did happen? What kind of person are you? Because I do know 2 types of people that do the different...
What kind of monster waits until the end? Who has patience for that in the digital information world that we live in? Who's waiting until the end? I don't know. Send me their name so I can ask them for help on how to concentrate on one thing at a time. No, I'm 100% researching at the same time. I've got the Wikipedia page up. I've got, if it's an old historical figure, I've got maybe their children or their family members up on Instagram. I want to see all the visuals and be Googling what I can in real time. Otherwise, I just feel like I don't understand.
Wow. You're like the Minority Report with all the screens going on at the same time whilst you're trying to watch a bloody movie.
Several different apps on my phone, which is kind of going against my advice earlier not to doom scroll. But I've got a lot going on, and I'll get into a vortex normally during the movie, and then I'll step away after the movie, think about it, and then while I'm working the next day, something will pop into my head, and I'll be like, oh, I've got to Google if that was real or not. So real time Googling. What do you do?
I wonder. Well, I'm the guy then that you need to meet because I do. I wonder if it's a generational thing.
Totally.
I wonder if us Gen Xers are prepared to let the artist deliver their piece, and then at the end we'll go and do our research, because that's what I do. Through it I'll think, oh, I need to remember about checking that, or I need to remember about checking that. And partly I don't want it to. If I don't know the story, I don't want to have any spoilers, which sounds silly for a dramatization of a historical event. But I'd still like to find out what happens in the show as opposed to researching it during it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a big movie goer. Like when I first moved to Melbourne, I didn't really have any friends. I'd go to movies like every week. And so that was consuming a movie in the cinema is totally different. You're not Googling. So I love doing that. But when it's the TV, it's like my mind's conditioned to do something else at the same time. So I think that puts me in a tough spot here.
Do you find that when there's a lull in something that you're watching that you just do pick up the phone and then quickly jump on Instagram or something for whatever reason? Because I've started to do that, and it annoys me that I do that, but it just shows you how much we've now been conditioned to, if you can't get my attention, my mind will go elsewhere.
Yeah, I do that all the time. And sadly, and I had to stop myself from doing this, but in the last week, my favourite new hobby is refreshing the exposure site list on the coronavirus webpage for the Victorian government. Just going latest added exposure sites, just refreshing that and checking, make sure I haven't been to any of them. So I was doing that as well. So there's a lot going on while I was watching the trial of the Chicago 7. There was Googling, Instagram stalking, Wikipediaing, and exposure site watching.
Okay, the plot. Talk to us about the plot.
The plot. Okay, so it is 1968 and it's the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Martin Luther King, has just died. There's a whole lot of sort of anti-government, anti-war sentiment going on in America. And essentially at the convention, there is a huge riot. There's about 10,000 people in Grant Park, which I've never been to Chicago. I don't know where that is. Anyway, a massive sort of protest. And then eventually there are 8 people who are charged with conspiracy and sort of starting the riots. and they are leaders of sort of progressive anti-Vietnam groups at the time. So you've got the Yippies, which are the International Youth Party. Is that right? Or the Party of International Youth?
Yep.
Yeah. What else is it? Tom Hayden, who is the leader of the Students for Democratic Society. And then you've got the mobilisation. Oh, gosh, this is such a long one. The Mobilisation Committee to End the War. And then you've got the Black Panther Party in the mix as well. So there are 8 men who go on trial for essentially starting the riots. They say it was the police in Chicago who started the riots. And then there's this long trial in court where there's a pretty biased judge sort of running the case. And the movie kind of intersects, it flashes backwards and forwards between what happened at the riots and the trial itself. So it's a political courtroom drama, really.
And my mum, who will be listening to this, is always on the lookout for TV shows. And my mum's go-to TV genre is always courtroom drama. It's like crack cocaine for her. So, Mum, this is the show for you if you haven't seen it. It's a political show trial, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Nixon is now the president. When the trial is running, they want to make a point, to sort of shut down the anti-war sort of protests and movement. So it's a huge thing that I assume at the time Americans were all tuning into this case.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point you make there, because when the Democratic National Convention happened, it was in 1968. The president that had largely overseen the escalation of the conflict in the Vietnam War at that time was LBJ, a Democratic president, Democratic administration. And so the left went to go protest at the Democratic National Convention, thinking that they needed to stop a Democratic president from continuing on America's involvement in this war in the southeast of Asia. As you pointed out, in that same year, Martin Luther King had been assassinated. Bobby Kennedy, who at the time was running for the Democratic nomination, was assassinated after winning the California primary. So things were really starting to stir up in 1968 before the convention. But obviously, when the convention happens, there's a big debate about who the nominee would be, what their position would be on the war, and obviously we have this sort of melting pot of political views on the left that counter against what the police were trying to do, and it just blows up into a massive riot. Interestingly, historically, it's also important to note that in the end there was an inquiry done into the actual riots, and it was the police that were found that were to be responsible for the actual riot occurring in the first place. So, but I think that happened after the actual trial. Anyway, so what kind of tone does this show have, do you think? It's an Aaron Sorkin film, so I think that's the tone that I would describe it as. But I'm keen to get your thoughts on it.
I would agree with you. I didn't know Aaron Sorkin wrote and directed this. And so when I saw his name pop up at the end, I was like, it all makes sense. I agree with you. The tone is Aaron Sorkin. If you are a West Wing fan, you'd be into this movie. It's the best way to describe it. If you're a Gen X white male interested in politics, don't know any of those, you're going to be into it. I can tell. It's interesting. That's how I would describe it to sort of people. It's got that West Wing feel where, there's lots of grand speeches. It can be very emotional and very dramatic, probably extremely unrealistic, but there's also interjections of comedy, and there is, some light moments as well. So it's not all doom and gloom.
I was the same as you, actually. Maybe 45 minutes into the watching it for the first time, I turned to my partner and said, "Is this an Aaron Sorkin film?" And I sort of Googled and went, yeah, okay, this makes sense. It just felt like that. The jokes that a Family Guy used to always make about Aaron Sorkin and is so doped up on cocaine that when he writes his stuff, it's just, it's word salad. People talking so fast and perfect sentences and people able to describe exactly what's happening at that point in time. And it just had that feel about it. So I think, definitely the tone of this film, it's an Aaron Sorkin piece. And if you don't like Aaron Sorkin, you may actually hate this. But as you said, if you are a Gen X white male that grew up watching The West Wing, then this is your show, baby. You're gonna love it. So let's talk about the characters. And normally I ask you this question, which is just describe the main characters, starting with, and I was going to suggest Eddie Redmayne and Sacha Baron Cohen. But could you? Once I wrote that question, I sort of thought to myself, actually, who are the main characters in this show? So I'm interested in your take on this. Who do you think are the actual main characters in this film?
It is really unclear to me. I don't know who the main characters are. None of them really stand out as the main character. Like, you don't really see a lot of character development throughout the whole sort of film. You just sort of get snippets. There is no main character. It is a true ensemble cast. I mean, maybe the judge.
Why?
It is about the trial. It is about his actions. I don't know. He seems to sort of bring it all together. So Judge Julius Hoffman, who's played by Frank Langella, who's incredible. He's, maybe because he sits in the middle.
And with the fact that we can't really start with who are the main characters and then move on from there, why don't we just run through? I mean, it's a pretty impressive list of actors that they've managed to lock in for this film. So why don't we just run the rule over each one of them, and I'll get your thoughts on each of them. I'll start with Eddie Redmayne for some reason, who plays Tom Hayden, who's the leader of the Student for Democratic Society. How did you think his performance was?
I mean, it was kind of boring, but he is the straight up and down sort of activist, right? His character, Tom, wants to do sort of everything by the book. He gets his hair cut before the trial. He's the only one that sort of shows any respect for the courtroom. So you've got Tom Hayden. I mean, Eddie Redmayne's performance was good, but his character was boring, I guess. So there wasn't really much need there. But he's certainly, I think he's meant to be one of the leaders. So you've him, and then you've got the Yippies, the Youth International Party, which is Sacha Baron Cohen as Abby Hoffman, who is a huge, hilarious figure. He's a real hippie. He's smoking dope all the time. He's got long hair. He's a little bit nuts. He's probably one of the best characters. He just refuses to abide by sort of the judge and what the judge wants him, how he wants him to behave in the court. And so that's a lot of funny banter between him and Frank Langella. So he's a real hippie. And alongside him in the Youth International Party is Jerry Rubin, who's played by Jeremy Strong, who I love. Obviously, I love him because he's Kendall Roy in Succession, one of the greatest TV shows of recent times. But he's also hippie, hilarious, and he's also probably the only comedic relief in the film. So you've got sort of the more serious activists in Tom Hayden. Then you've got the hippies who really just they want to make change, but they also want to smoke a lot of dope in Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin. Then John Carroll Lynch plays David Gellinger, who's the leader of the National Mobilization Committee and the War. He's older, middle class. You don't see much from him. And then Bobby Seale, who's the chairman of the Black Panther Party, who is played by Yahya Abdul Mateen. And those are the main characters.
I'm just trying to think of other films in which Sacha Baron Cohen has played a straight role. Because I think that, from memory, I think he has, but for some reason I'm drawing a blank. I probably should have done a bit more research before today's show. But this one I think he's done a very good job at. I mean, when I say it's a straight role in terms of it's not Ali G or Borat, right? But there is a comic timing to his acting that I think does bring the film alive, and the way that he bounces off his sort of partner in crime from the Yippies, Jerry Rubin, as you do point out, acted by Jeremy Strong from HBO Succession, they are great together. But also the repartee between Baron Cohen and Frank Langella, who plays the judge, is great television as well. What I was interested in is that Jeremy Strong, who plays Jerry Rubin, is notorious as a method actor. And
Right.
It's interesting to think that if he's a method actor and he's going to be playing Jerry Rubin with the long hair and all that kind of, the hippie kind of tropes, that to do that for 6 months whilst, preparing for it would be quite and apparently he does that. Like, apparently he just goes into that role nonstop, 24/7 for the entire filming. And that was him playing that. Now, think of him and then think of him being Kendall. It's such a contrast.
Such a contrast. He would have had a wild time filming this in between seasons of Succession.
I know. You wouldn't know if you're coming or going.
Going back to Sacha Baron Cohen for a second, he was nominated for an Oscar for this, which, in my opinion, is a stretch.
Yeah, right.
He was nominated for supporting actor. He didn't win, but I think it was a good performance. It was a strong performance, but did he deserve to be nominated for an Oscar? I don't know.
Is it, though, that was he nominated for the 2021 Oscars or the 2020 Oscars?
Well, it was a ceremony that was in 2021, but it's for the years before movies.
Like, without going to a massive segue, but I am keen to get your thoughts on this. The 2021 Oscars and the whole awards season will be looked back on as being a pretty shallow talent pool to choose from, just because of COVID. And a lot of the major cinemas, and we'll probably talk about this later, aren't releasing a lot of their stuff. So there isn't as much to choose from. Like, this is you think back in sort of the years of SNL, and there's been some strong casts and there's been some weak casts. I think people will look back in the 2021 era of film and go, whoever won the Oscar that year, you kind of, it's like when Collingwood won the 1990 grand final. Everyone else was shit as well.
Well, except though, Stephen, and I think we might need to dedicate more time to this, except that I think it was the first time that a female director, or maybe the first Asian female director to win an Oscar. So, there were some good films nominated there. I think it's just no one really got to see them, right? Because no one could go to the movies.
Yeah. I think, I used to do a podcast years ago with a mate of mine, and we would always do the preview of the Oscars, and we'd make sure that we went and saw all 8 films or 9 or however many get nominated for Best Picture. This year, if I was to do that episode again, I wouldn't be able to, because I think I only got to see two out of the 7 or 8 that were nominated. It's just impossible. Anyway, as I said,
maybe next year.
I digress. Yes. So another couple of characters I want to throw in there as well. Mark Rylance, who's an English. Actually, there's a lot of actual English actors in this film, which is interesting as well. Plays the defense counsel for the Seven, a guy by the name of William Kunstler, which is a very unfortunate name. And if he was in high school, he would have got a lot of shit from his mates. But he was incredible. I thought he is one of those guys that just pops up in films or TV shows and nails his role. It's not you won't know who he is unless you Google him, and then you'll see his face and go, oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, I've seen you and stuff. You're good. And once again, he pops up in this film and nails the performance. And I really felt there's a frustration in the film because of the judge, which we'll get to in a moment, and the scenes when Kunstler is getting incredibly frustrated in the courtroom. we all feel his frustration as well. And the moments when he yells and gets done for contempt of court and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of, I feel like we're living vicariously through him. We're getting a release through his anger, which is, I think, a very good performance from Rylance. What was your thoughts on him?
It's funny, he didn't stand out to me as much as he did to you. I don't know what you were, maybe it was when I was Googling, but he kept pushing things along. He was interesting, but he definitely wasn't a standout character for me.
There you go.
At all.
Didn't you think that, with an ensemble like this, there are moments where characters have to, if you're writing it, you've got to kind of have scenes where they can interact through each other to move the plot along. And I thought he and the judge were critical in that.
Yeah, I would agree. He had moments of pushing it forward and bringing it all together. But in general, when I look back, it's like I'm not remembering him.
There you go. I'll let him know. We're cousins. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who I love, but I don't know if other people out there do. What are your thoughts on Joseph? Because I feel like he can be a bit of a divisive character because he.
Who doesn't love Joseph Gordon-Levitt? 10 Things I Hate About You, Third Rock from the Sun, 500 Days of Summer.
Well, that one.
Inception.
Yeah, I think he's great in all of that stuff, but I've heard other people really shit on him. He doesn't have a huge role in this. He's the assistant federal prosecutor, but your thoughts on GJL?
He's a strong performer in any movie, in my opinion, and I thought this role was particularly good. He knows he's in there to make a political point, and he's trying to do the right thing anyway. I think they actually humanize him, quite a lot. And there are some really good moments in the film where you can see that he understands the impact of all the deaths of Americans in Vietnam and the reason why these protests were happening. And, more so than the judge, he's able to show empathy, I think. But again, his character, he doesn't have a central role, I don't think either. You're still on the characters, on the defendants. Your attention is really drawn to them for the most part, I think. But I think it was a good performance by him.
I think you're right. Like the opening scene, as it is, I think he is in one of the early scenes or one of the opening scenes, and I was like, oh, hello, okay, right, this is going to be interesting. This is. I kind of thought that a lot of the movie would pass through his character, but then it didn't really, did it? And I was surprised by that.
Yeah, he kind of just faded out until the end. There's one point in the middle and one point at the end, but really the rest, you didn't see much of him.
And he's also that classic Sorkin character that is like in The West Wing, there was always the good Republicans that, that it's kind of like the fictitious Republican that Democrats dream up that are moderate. Like, sure, they want to win and they're Republicans and they believe in, fiscal responsible small government and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, they've got a social conscience. And I felt like that the Gordon-Levitt's character was that character for this particular show, or this film, I should say. We've spoken about Frank Langella Jr., who, for those of you who are unfamiliar, he was in Frost Nixon. He was in The Americans, which I would argue is also up there, the top 5 best TV shows of the last 10 years, next to Succession. And in Good Night, Good Luck, he plays Judge Julius Hoffman. Your thoughts on Judge Hoffman?
He was great. He was a standout performance for me. He was terrifying. What an awful person. I hate him. I hate his character. And I really don't want to give away any spoilers, but there are some serious and dark moments, I think, in the film that happen in the courtroom that I found completely shocking. And I think it was also great because I didn't realize it was Frank Langella for a little while. I didn't get to Googling him until halfway through the movie. So I was busy Googling something else. But I think he was a standout performance for me. because the movie is definitely from the perspective of the defendants and the guys on trial. And so it's done a good job in making me, hate the judge, who I think was, acting in a corrupt manner, in my opinion.
And your opinion is noted. The performance of him, I haven't been that angry in a courtroom since In the Name of the Father. Like, I was getting really pissed off. Like, I was like, this guy is killing me right now.
I know.
Like, such a good performance.
Yeah, it was great. That for me, Frank Langella and Jeremy Strong, they were my favourites.
Two others I want to mention. Michael Keating, kind of not a cameo role, but not far from it, plays the US Attorney General. Thoughts on his performance?
He's great. It was nice to see him. It was cute. And I would call that a cameo.
It was a cameo, wasn't it, really?
Yeah, it was. And he's actually a pivotal character. I won't say why, but that's a really key point in the movie where he steps in. I think he does that brilliantly.
And last but certainly not least, Caitlin Fitzgerald plays Daphne O'Connor, who's an undercover FBI agent, and I would argue the only woman in the film.
No, there was some women typewriting in the courtroom.
Yes. Mostly white-collar receptionist roles, that is true.
and even the progressives had a female receptionist.
Yeah.
But Bernadine, I reckon. Anyway, the fact that we're struggling to think of women is a really it's a reflection on how male this cast is.
Yeah.
But I love this character. She's in Sweet Bitter, this actor who, which is a TV show that I really like. I think it's on Stan. And she's also in, what is it? This Meryl Streep movie. It's Complicated.
Yes.
And that's a beautiful movie. Anyway, so I like this actor. But she is an undercover FBI agent sent in to sort of trip up Jerry Rubin, who is the hilarious, pot smoking, just loose unit yippee hippie. And that storyline is one of my favorites. How he's sort of like fallen in love with her and thinks it's the real deal, and it's really her when she finds out she's an FBI agent.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a great little thing to include. And definitely broke up sort of the more male heavy scenes.
Yeah, it was very bloke heavy. It felt like a Warrigal nightclub at about 3:30 in the morning. She was
Never been, but I'll take your word for it.
You're missing out. She's also in Succession. She's the partner to Kieran Culkin's character.
Oh, she is too. Oh, yeah.
She's
popping up everywhere.
One of those ones that's starting to just that next generation of actors that's just popping up in good TV shows and films. Where does this film struggle for you, or where does it let you down?
So I found some of the Attorney General scenes boring, like we were talking about with the prosecutor, with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character. You kind of forget about him. And I think those scenes were sort of weak. I think there was too much focus at the beginning, I think, on, the Attorney General's office and what that was happening. I think we kind of got that, they were just trying to make a political point. I don't think they needed to spend that much time sort of explaining that at the beginning. And then his character got lost. So that was a real, issue for me, especially with an actor as good as Joseph Gordon-Levitt. What else? And I think the characters are so, as I mentioned, the things that stand out are those hilarious characters. There's so many big characters in this film that that's kind of all. Sometimes that's all you can really remember, just the characters themselves, and a lot of the other important sort of bits in between that tie it together sort of got lost. And maybe that's just a Sorkin thing.
Well, isn't that...
where there are these big grand moments and then everything in between is just really quiet and you forget about it.
I mean, that is a challenge in that you're trying, if you set the task for a director or a screenplay writer to say, right, here is a 6-month trial that has a lot of subplots that happened within it. and it involves 8 individuals in particular. I need you to make a film that goes for 2 hours and cover off a 6-month trial. Be true to the actors' stories or the characters' stories. Be true to the facts of the case, but also try and achieve character development across 8 plus supporting roles. It's not easy to do. Something I think that worked for Mrs. America when you and I reviewed it last time is it's a 10-part hour-long episode series, and in that you can then get into the meat and the development of the characters, and I think that worked so well. One could argue this probably should have been that type of film as well. Sorry, that should have been a TV series, not a 2-hour film. That's where I think it falls down for me. They are just trying to do too much in too little time.
Yeah, cram too much in. Like 2 hours is also a long time.
Look, it was for moviegoers in the 1990s, but shit today, like 2 hours is a quick film these days. Like if you're getting out of there for 3 hours, then that's on average. Like if you go to the Palace Cinemas and you order you get the glass of wine and you can choose, do you want feature length epic? I'm going to get shit faced. This movie's going to go longer than Ben-Hur. Everyone's choosing that. People just say, look, just give me the bottle. Just give me the bottle, and I'll finish it off in this film. Don't worry about that.
I have a low tolerance for long movies too. Like I think all movies should be an hour and 45 minutes.
Correct.
But that's it.
Yes, I agree. What characters, subplots did you think just didn't land? We kind of touched on a couple, but any others that you want to mention?
No, I don't think I have any more. I think, the character who played, what was his name? Oh, David Gellinger. So the mobilization committee to end the war, the leader of that movement. Like he sort of popped up at the beginning. You thought he was going to be a key character, when he's saying goodbye to his wife, when he's about to go off to, the convention. And then he gets a 2-minute spot sort of towards the end, and that's it. You never really hear from him again. So I found that a bit weird, a bit strange.
Well, and to be fair, I've only listed we've only spoken of 6 of the 8 defendants. There are 2 others that I haven't even mentioned that are featured in the film, but they were so insignificant, I just couldn't be bothered typing out their name and putting it in the notes for you and I to talk about. They have literally one scene and they talk to each other and they basically say to each other, I don't know why we're here. And it's true in real life. They didn't know why they were there. They were basically local organisers in Chicago who were part of the protest, but they just kind of got swept up. I mean, that was the intent by the prosecution's office, was to make this ensemble that could impact. Like they basically dragged in Bobby Searle because he was a Black Panther, and that would get media, and they would use him to sort of razz it up. They dragged in Sasha, what's his name, Abby Hoffman, and Jerry Rubin, because they were the hippies, So they were trying to build this sort of case that here's a motley crew of activists who are here to cause a riot in downtown Chicago. But the truth of the matter was, none of them really knew each other. And some of them only met each other for the very first time in the freaking courtroom or in the pretrial. But then that kind of came off in the film as well, because there was 2 people there, 3 people, if you add in David Gellinger, that we just didn't really get to know. The other thing that fell down for me was Sacha Baron Cohen's attempt at a New England accent. Abby Hoffman is from Worcester, Massachusetts, but I just felt like the acting coach sat down with Sasha and said, Sasha, it's easy. Just park your car in the Harvard yard and you'll be fine from there on, and say things like, get a sixer, go see the Red Sox. And that was it. And he just basically did that the whole time. It was shit. It was a terrible New England accent. It's going to go down in the history as some of the greatest, worst New England accents ever done in modern cinema, along with Tom Hanks in Catch Me If You Can and Jack Nicklaus in The Departed. Didn't even bother. Just pathetic.
He's Jack Nicklaus.
Oh.
You mean Jack Nicholson?
Yeah, that one. Sorry, Jack Nicklaus plays golf. You know what I mean.
I don't know any golf players, but anyway. Okay. I couldn't tell you. I mean, to be honest, I do think a lot of the accents were a little off.
Well, half the cast were English.
Yeah. And I knew there was something weird about, so Eddie Redmayne character's Tom Hayden. there was something off about him, and I was like, oh yeah, he's English, so he's not talking right. That was weird.
Yeah. I read in one of the reviews someone had said that these English actors did a better job of an American accent than some Americans. I was like, man, you must be tone deaf. I don't know what the hell you've been listening to. Anyway, standout moments for you.
Standout moments. I think I mentioned this before, but so the trial of the Chicago 7 were originally 8. And Bobby Seale was the leader of the Black Panther Party, and he tried to sort of get out of being tried at the same time as everyone else. He was only in Chicago for a couple of hours or something. He had nothing to do with it. And the way he was treated, and there's a moment in the film where the judge orders him to do something, and I'm not going to spoil it, but that was a real standout moment about, it was a really important scene about the different treatment between black men and white men, right there in the courtroom. So that scene, and then the final scene at the end of the trial, and Tom Hayden gets to say the closing argument on behalf of the rest, the entire 7. And that was a really powerful moment, I think, and sort of a really inspiring moment. I won't spoil that because that's at the end of the film, but those were my 2 ones that stood out the most.
Yeah, I think I don't think I can add to that. Certainly the latter one was just dripping Aaron Sorkin kind of. We all knew that was coming, or you knew something like that was coming. But the other scene with Bobby Seale was, pretty confronting in a modern Western democracy that has built on pillars of what's meant to be, the justice system is fair and equal. Key lines from the film. Any key lines for you?
I don't have one. It's an Aaron Sorkin film. How could you say just one line or one quote? I'd be here reading out, an entire speech, an entire paragraph. There wasn't one line that stood out to me, I wouldn't think. But there was some powerful dialogue and some really great screenwriting, just not in one quote. What about you?
I'm with you as well. Because this is a question that you and I normally do, and I realised when I wrote this one for this film, I was like, oh God, it's an Aaron Sorkin film. Where the hell are you going to find a decent line out of it, But the one that sort of stood out for me the most that I did remember that I kind of went, aha, was Abby Hoffman and Tom Hayden are having an argument with each other, which is meant to be a metaphor for the divisiveness within the broad left, I guess. And it was another subplot area that they kind of just scratched the surface of that I thought was interesting, and I wanted to learn more about that. But then actually when I went back and read it, apparently they actually, during the trial, actually agreed on most things with each other. They were actually quite united in their quest to get off. So this scene seemed to be a bit fabricated. But anyway, it was an interesting point. Abby Hoffman and Tom Hayden are having an argument about the tactics and the strategy of the left in terms of trying to deal with the Vietnam War. And they're both accusing each other of being piss ants and not good enough at what they're doing. And Abby Hoffman asks a question of Tom Hayden, who's talking about why elections are important. And Abby Hoffman says, winning elections, that's the first thing on your wish list? Not equalities, justice, education, poverty and progress, they're second? And Tom Hayden says back to him, if you don't win elections, it doesn't matter what's second. And it's astonishing to me that someone still has to explain that to you. And I just felt that is the left personified, even in Australia, between social democrats like you and I, on the centre left, and then the hard left, who are just still doing all this sort of crazy shit. Because in the end, we have to win elections. And because only from government can we actually impact change on those things like equality, justice, education, poverty and progress. So that stood out for me. I just thought that was a lovely insight into some of the challenges that we're facing in 2021, not just in 1968.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I think it is Tom Hayden who says as well, I don't have time for a cultural revolution. It distracts from actual revolutions. Yeah. I think that might be that was probably one of the only lines that stood out as well.
Next, we're going to do other bits. Any other bits that you wanted to jump in before we do Does It Stack Up in Real Life, which is kind of weird to ask given it's a historical drama. But other bits you wanted to add from it?
I don't have any other bits. I mean, it was a pretty looking film. I wish I got to see this in the cinema. I think I would have paid more attention and been drawn in. You know, the sets were beautiful, the costumes were beautiful. It was a proper blockbuster.
Interesting, the soundtrack, because you would be tempted as a director or even a musical director for a film set in the 60s to just, you know, dig into, you know, pretty significant era in modern pop music, one would say. And one would maybe even argue 1968 is even quite more historic than others. But they didn't, and it's an original score. And I think they stayed away from, there is no pop music that is in the soundtrack. It's all original score.
I think that sort of goes to the fact that it is a courtroom legal drama, right? And if you'd put in the good music, I think it would have distracted from it and sort of made it a little bit less serious. But I mean, I love a good soundtrack and good pop music, but yeah, that was missing.
A couple of other bits of historical facts. Jerry Rubin, who we've mentioned, who was one of the yippies, he was an early investor in Apple and then became a millionaire and then decided to become a stockbroker and was quite successful on Wall Street. And Renee Davis, who's also one of the seven, ended up becoming a venture capitalist, which goes to prove that all trots eventually become Tories.
What sellouts?
I know. They're all about the revolution, and then all of a sudden they just decide to make, you know, billions. Classic boomers, right? Classic boomers. The other thing I think is interesting is that this film began, Sorkin wrote this in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, and he was partnering up with Steven Spielberg to get it produced, and then the writer's strike happened, which then kind of put it all on hiatus, and then they didn't pick it up again until the 2016, 2017, and then led it all the way through to getting it ready to go, and then drop it in 2020, and then we had COVID, and obviously cinemas were all locked down, and the impact that that had on the film industry. So the studio made the decision to have it released, had like a limited theatre release in places where they could. And then they decided to drop it on Netflix and go all out on Netflix. And I just think it's interesting, considering there are so many films that currently that were due to be released either last year or early this year have continued to move their release dates, because both in the United States and around the world, they haven't been able to open up to packed cinemas. And I can list, you know, and this list is extensive, but even just a couple: the new James Bond film, No Time to Die; the new Wes Anderson film, The French Dispatch; Black Widow from the Marvel Cinematic Universe; the next Mission Impossible, have all opted to keep on shifting their release date. In fact, I think James Bond has been moved 4 times now, and there's rumours it's going to get moved again. Whereas some of them have decided to opt, like this film, Wonder Woman 1984 on HBO, Cruella on Disney+. There's a whole bunch that are going, you know what, stuff up, let's just go to streaming services. If you are running if you're running Paramount Pictures or Universal, what do you do right now? Do you drop it on a streaming service, or do you keep on holding out, not knowing when there'll be the right time to show it to a full cinema across, starting with the United States and then moving to the bigger markets like Asia?
You should put it on streaming service. Just push it out. I mean, I don't know. I know there are huge budgets, right? But I don't think that many people would have gone to see this film at the movie. I don't think people would have actually been like, yeah, I want to go see a movie about the Vietnam War. Like, I don't think really it would have been that popular, even as an Aaron Sorkin film. So I think it's actually a good thing that they put this out. I mean, I wish I saw it in the cinemas, but I think it's a good thing they put it out on streaming. I think a lot more people have watched it than they would have if it was released in the cinema. Unfortunately, I did go to see Wonder Woman 1984 in the cinemas in between lockdowns or something, or just when we got out of lockdown last year, and it was an awful movie and I wanted my money back.
It was such a letdown.
I wish I watched that. I wish I knew it was on a streaming service.
That was such a letdown after the first one too.
So disappointing. I felt like it set women back too. It's like I was also excited, and it was so lame.
Same director, same cast. How can you get it wrong the second time?
Ugh, yuck.
Anyway, let's talk about it in terms of in real life. How does this film stack up? Now, obviously, the timing of the release of this film, I remember the film was about the lead up to a critical presidential election in 1968, was released on the eve of a critical presidential election in 2020 and the Trump administration. And let's not forget that it was coming off the back of the summer protests around, Black Lives Matter, police brutality, institutional racism. That is not a coincidence that they released it then. When you're watching it, I think I can't actually recall when I watched it. It got released in October last year. I don't know if I saw it initially then, but when you did watch it, did you think about what you're watching on the screen and then how it relates to life in America right now in the political world and questions about the police and its role in society and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, it's really hard not to think about it, especially the police brutality stuff. I only watched it this week, so I'm watching it after sort of the outcome of the George Floyd case in the US, which was recently handed down, and sort of over a year on from a real uptick in the Black Lives Matter movement. And again, and this was like when we talked about Miss America, like you just think how long people have struggled sort of with the same issue. They're still there no matter how much people try to fight it. So but then the outcome of the George Floyd sort of trial, that some hope in the judicial system in America with that decision as well. So I think maybe if it was a different decision, I would have felt really sort of defeated about it, having watched this film. But I think there's a little bit uplifting. But yeah, it was you couldn't not draw comparisons between sort of what's happening now in the US and what was happening then.
One of the things that I found interesting, and this is always a criticism that I have of Sorkin political dramas, is that every character knows what to say at the right time and say the right things. And I think that the reality is that, particularly in social movement building, that it's built on imperfections and failures and mistakes and poor judgment. And I just think that was lacking a bit in the characters. The only time I got to see that was when they were kind of arguing amongst themselves, which is a natural thing that happens in politics. We all sit around and argue with each other. We don't agree on everything, but it was the world was a little bit too perfect, like it always is in a Sorkin film. So in terms of an in real life perspective, I just thought it missed the mark.
Yeah, and they didn't, as you said before, they didn't really even know each other. They were different, they were working in completely different sort of organizations. So yeah, that was a stretch.
The other thing I read about it in terms of in real life, I was interested to get the thoughts of the actual real life people that were portrayed in this film. Now, those that are still alive had all said that they didn't think that their characters were an accurate reflection who they were and their involvement in the riot and in the trial. They didn't think there was an accurate reflection on their values and their feelings and their thoughts and their experiences. Must be pretty weird though to be in your late 80s and then see all these huge big Hollywood actors come and play you.
Oh, well, it would be so strange. I would hate that.
Who would you get to play you?
Well, unfortunately, there's not a lot of Filipino representation on television. So I don't know who would get to play me. I can't pinpoint anyone. That's a real shame. It's a lack of diversity. I don't know, like if I could pick anyone, like Mila Kunis, maybe. Love her. She's got long brown hair.
Close enough.
I wish I looked like her. I love her acting. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously a movie about me would be a comedy. So it's like completely different vibe.
Yeah.
What would your movie genre be if it was about your life?
Who would I get to play me, or what would the genre be?
Well,
would it be a
so who do you want to play, and then what genre is a movie about your life?
I don't know who I'd get to play me. Someone made a joke once. Remember David Wenham played that absolute dickhead of a character in that Australian film where he was an absolute loser and he was going up to the judge and just saying the wrong things. I can't remember the name of the film, and I know people who will be listening to this right now will be screaming it at their car radio or whatever. But people have made jokes about, Stephen, that's you. Genre, I would like it to be a kind of quirky Wes Anderson style, you know.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why not?
You're aesthetically, the movie about you would be a Wes Anderson film, yeah.
Yeah, I don't care if it's not an accurate portrayal. In fact, I want it to be lies. I want it to be, you know, complete fabrication of my life. All I ask for is you put me in good clothes, I want good sets, and I want a damn good soundtrack.
Yeah, I would agree. I want Mindy Kaling to write mine.
Yeah.
Mindy Kaling can play me. I mean, I'm not Indian, but like I'll take it. I love her. She's probably the person I'm most like. Anyway, sorry, we've really gotten distracted here writing our own films about our lives, which will never happen. Because our lives are not that interesting.
Well, you never know. The internet's very expansive, so things could change. Who knows?
But I will just say, you know what I'm thinking about for your films? I think if it wasn't a Wes Anderson film, it'd be like a Reality Bites sort of vibe for you too, right?
Probably, you know, absolutely. It's a coming of age film for my came out basically when I was finishing high school and going to university. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I still watch it as a Gen Xer and look at it with nostalgia and love it.
I bet you do.
Yeah. Yeah. But sadly, I'm not the cool Ethan Hawke character. I think I end up becoming the Ben Stiller character in real life.
Well, looking back at it, Ethan Hawke's character is trash. So that's a good thing, Stephen.
Yes. I would never refer to someone in a dress nice doily. I would never do that to another human being. Two other things other bits. A lot of criticism from the Jewish community that completely erased the Jewish heritage of many of the characters in the Chicago 7, particularly Hoffman and Rubin. And obviously it fails the Bechdel test, which is in which two women have to be talking to each other and each other only, and only talking about women and not other men characters. And since I can't think of a second female character, I don't think it's going to pass.
Definitely fails. And I mean, is that I don't know. Admittedly, it's embarrassing. I never actually finished The West Wing, but that's a criticism of Sorkin in general, right? He doesn't know how to write women, and that he doesn't write women.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm taking a lead on you on this one.
I just made that up, but let's just say that it's true.
Let's go with that. I like it.
It is true in this film.
Indeed. It won the Best Screenplay at the 2020 Golden Globes. It won the Most Outstanding Cast in a Motion Picture at the Screen Actors Guild Awards, and Rotten Tomatoes gave it 89%. Tess Farrell, what do you rate the Trial of the Chicago 7 out of 5?
I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. 3 stars out of 5.
Right. Can you remember what you did, Mrs. America and The Politician?
I think I gave Mrs. America 2.5 because I found some parts boring.
I think
I'm going to fact check myself.
We established that you're a harsh critic.
Well, am I a harsh critic, or am I just into rom-coms and trashy TV, and therefore the highbrow stuff that we dive into is, it's a little bit more challenging to me. But I hope the listeners can kind of take my perspective as a bit different to yours. Anyway, what are you giving it?
I gave it 3.9.
Yeah.
Just,
That's a good score.
That's not a bad score. Before we wrap up, I'm actually keen to hear from you about what else you're watching. Since we're in lockdown, can you help your fellow Victorians out with some shows that you have been mainlining, not just in this lockdown, but maybe in the last since we last spoke over the summer?
Yes, I can. This is my favourite thing to talk about. Number one, during lockdown, I tend to regress and go, things that make me feel comforted, like Gossip Girl and the OC and all that kind of stuff. But thankfully, the Friends reunion came out last week. Did you ever watch Friends?
I did.
So I watched the Friends reunion and I cried, and it made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. I loved it. People who are criticizing it, I don't know. What do you want from a reunion? They all look amazing. They all look like they love each other and that they are genuine friends and that they had the best time filming. So the reunions, they go back and visit the set, just them. There are bits with James Gordon, who is interviewing them with an audience. And then they even sort of do a table read of some of the scenes, and I loved it. I loved it so much. It made me feel so uplifted when lockdown started last week. I started watching The Mayor of Easttown.
Hang on, before you move on.
Yeah.
Joey, who plays Joey? What's the name of that? Matt LeBlanc. I get a sense that him sitting with his arms folded, looking to the side, has become a bit of a meme. Is that right?
Yeah, it has. He got a real mockery. I think for just like having put on a few.
Right. It came across my internet world from via sort of family and friends in Ireland, and everyone's sort of saying he's like your Uncle Jerry who rocks up to your party and just loves listening to the stories of, what your nieces and nephews are up to these days. And, Patrick's now got a job at the city and Siobhan's now gone into university and he's got his arms folded and just wrapped. He's loving these stories. I sure know you're doing a great job there.
He doesn't say much. He's just listening, and he's so cute. I love it. He's also got his arms folded because when you've got a big tummy, that's a comfortable way to sit. That's a comfortable way to rest your arm. Anyway, so that was great. Everyone should watch that.
Yep.
And then The Mayor of Easttown, which I started watching. Kate Winslet is a detective in a small town in America. I would describe it as like American Broadchurch, trying to get to the bottom of like the death of a young woman. I had to stop watching it though. I had to pause it because it's a bit gritty, a bit too dark. But I really do want to know who done it, who the murderer was. And the only thing that I can think of that I binged really quickly this year that I loved was The Flight Attendant on, I think Binge and maybe Foxtel. Kaylee Cuoco, who used to be on The Big Bang Theory, it's completely different to that. She's an air hostess, big party gal, she's in Bangkok, takes home one of the guests on the flight, wakes up the next morning after a big night in Bangkok, and he's lying there murdered, dead next to her, covered in blood. And then it's a dark comedy about piecing together what happened that night. And I thought it was great. I binged it really quickly.
I loved it. I thought it was great as well, and I didn't know what to expect. It does take a dark turn in terms of her character development that I didn't see coming at the start, because at the start it was all kind of, Skittles and rainbows and but someone's dead next to me, but ha ha ha, I'm a bit of a klutz kind of, and then after a while you're like going, oh okay, right, this is getting a little bit serious.
Yeah, it's got a lot of depth, that TV show. I loved it. And
for someone I never watched, what was that other show she was on that everyone?
Big Bang Theory, no me either.
Channel 9 sort of shit. I'd sort of seen 1 or 2 episodes of that and going, oh god, this is awful. But so I was a bit reluctant at the start just because of that. And I got hooked.
What else have you been watching?
Well, I have been watching. I'm a sucker for Marvel, so I've been watching. I watched WandaVision and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which are the 2 TV series that have come out of Marvel, sort of offshoots from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think WandaVision's better than The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier got annoying after a while and just sort of felt like, the B team of the Avengers, whereas WandaVision actually was super interesting. And the plot unraveled and kept you kind of going, oh, what's going to happen next? Whereas I didn't really give a shit about the other one. I don't want to sound like I'm really sophisticated, but I have been watching 2 French shows.
Ooh, la la.
Oui. Lupin, which is about a kid who grows up in Paris, of obviously African descent through the sort of French colonies, obviously large black community in Paris, and his father was like a butler for a wealthy French Parisian family. His father goes to prison, so there's a lot of flashbacks from when he's a young kid. And then he, years later, his name Lupin, wants to take revenge on what he thinks is the family have set his father up. So it's a good series, but it kind of ended on a cliffhanger, and when it finished season 2, but it's about to release later this month. I think June 11. The next season's about to drop, which will be great. Looking forward to that. Something I've only just started watching is The Bureau, which is on SBS On Demand.
Oh, The Bureau is good.
Yeah, and I'm kind of getting into that as well. And one other one that it probably was on last year, but I just think was a lovely little TV series that was on Apple TV, Ted Lasso. And it stars... I knew I was going to forget his name. I should have bloody wrote it down.
Jason Sudeikis, right?
Yes, thank you. Because I always get him and John Krasinski muddled up. Jason Sudeikis, who is an NFL, a college football coach who gets bought by an English football Premier League team to be their coach, but knows nothing about English football. And it's about him just settling into London and being the coach. And he's been set up to fail. And he just slowly wins them over with his positivity and just American all-round can-do-ness. It drops during lockdown. It dropped every Friday night, and it was just a lovely way to end the week. It was fun. It wasn't taking itself too seriously, and it was just I would call it a nice little TV series. Just a nice little TV series.
Oh, I have to watch that.
Ted Lasso. You can't go wrong. All right. Tess Farrell. You should get your own TV show called Tess Farrell. Great to have you back on the show again. Lovely to see you again. Thank you so much for breaking down another TV/film in the genre of social, change, justice, politics. It's been great.
Thank you very much for having me. Happy watching, everyone.
You too.